We've been contacted by people throughout Britain desperate to have their family mysteries resolved by our team. Families are flocking here today to fill in the missing puzzle pieces from their ancestors' lives.
Trying to find out a bit more about my dad's Irish ancestors and the potential Italian root we have somewhere.
Information about my maternal great-grandmother.
Right.
She used to perform on the music halls, and it's believed that she went off with her agent.
Right.
And had 2 more sons.
Cracking the puzzles are our experts, ancestry genealogist Brad Argent.
Definitely have that map of somebody who's got some English ancestry and something else.
Historian and writer Tessa Dunlop.
As far as your family are concerned, Minnie's biological father wasn't the one that's legally down there as her father.
But first, historian and law lecturer Onyeka Nubia is helping Londoner Jonty Stern. He wants to know why his Jewish family observed a traditional 7-day funeral ritual for a man who never died.
I very much believe that history is part of today, so looking at my own history explains how I came to be here today. I'm Jonty Stern, I'm always known as Jonty. I was born in London. I've been doing research into the family tree for a couple of years. I absolutely love history. Well, many years ago, my mother and father went to my Jewish grandparents for dinner. While they were there, the topic of my great-grandfather, Simon Stern, came up, so my father's grandfather. And during the course of that dinner, my father said what a sad thing it was that his grandfather had died at such a young age, he was only in his 40s, which was the story he'd always been told. My great-aunt said, "Don't you believe it, honey? We saw him out in America." So it turned out he'd lived for many years longer. He'd abandoned the family. And in the Jewish religion, that's a really shocking thing to do. So as far as they were concerned, he was dead. And they sat shiva for him, which is what Jewish people do when somebody dies. Abandoning the family, it was such a shocking thing. As far as they were concerned, he'd passed away. I don't know why he left the family here. Maybe he just had a breakdown and couldn't cope with a large family and all the children and just thought, right, that's it, I'm off. It's possible he was chasing the American dream. It's very difficult to know. I think if we found the answer to this, my father would be very happy. It's something I think I'd very much like to do, because I know it would have meant a great deal to him. And from wherever it is he is, wherever it is we go after this world, I'm sure we'll be able to see all of this going on.
Jonty.
Hello,
how are you?
Fine, thank you.
It's your father's grandfather?
That's right, yes, it is.
Right. This is your family tree. This is the elusive great-grandfather, Simon Stern.
He lived a long time. Yeah, a lot later than we were told.
We also know that he was probably born in Poland.
Yes.
And so came to this country. So, Jonty, in the 1891 census, he's placed as living in Woodford, Essex. And it shows that he was married to Sarah Stiglitz.
Right.
Your great-grandmother. He had 4 children, and then later, another child. Now, there is a further census of 1911, and in that census, Simon is missing. The reason why Simon doesn't appear is because he left the UK aboard a ship called the SS St. Louis.
Wow. So you've got the actual name of the ship?
SS St. Louis.
SS St. Louis.
Which is bound for New York. What was he looking for in America?
I don't know. Did he already have a lady here, or did he find one there?
What was he? Good question. Perhaps it's the American dream. Would you blame him?
I wouldn't if he was single.
If you found his gravestone, would you lay a flower there?
Yes.
Would you sat Shiva for him again?
Probably. You can't really blame people in the past for living in a world that's so different from ours.
This is the passenger list. Your great-grandfather's name is on it. He arrived on the 4th of June. This is a petition for naturalization from New Jersey. The interesting thing about American naturalization, say from 1900 to the 1930s, is that Americans were taking people based on a quota-based system. Poland has a quota. But a British quota was a larger quota. So if you were coming from Britain, you were more likely to get in. Your great-grandfather, because he was now British, would fit that quota.
So he left Poland always intending to go to America, and Britain was a stopover?
We don't know for sure. But it certainly made it easier for him because he was coming from Britain. In those naturalization papers, he had changed his name to George Simon Stern. And on the 7th of January, 1914, he married Ruby Weinstein in Newark, New Jersey. These are a copy of her naturalization papers, clearly stating that she was born in Poland. Not far.
Oh. Not far from where he came from. Goodness. So did he definitely know her already? Or it seems likely? So that was always the plan?
It's very possible.
That's just incredible.
She came to New York less than a year after Simon. How do you feel about that?
I must say I'm liking him less as the proceedings are going on.
But he did visit this country on the 18th of September, 1932. This is a copy of the passenger list. See his age there, 63.
So it's not very long before he passed away?
Not very long.
Maybe he wanted to see everybody for one last time?
But the community had already sat Shiva for him.
They had. That must have been very weird for everybody.
Everybody had said that he was now dead.
Maybe he didn't care about things like that. Who knows what was going on through his mind?
Now you do know things that you did not know already.
Tons, yeah.
I hope that what we've talked about has helped to provide closure.
Absolutely.
For your whole family, your father and you.
Yeah, because he did a lot of work towards this. It's wonderful you've been able to complete what he started. I'm terribly grateful. It's absolutely amazing.
We're grateful that you shared your family history with us.
It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm wanting to like my great-grandfather, but the more I heard about him, the more I didn't like him. The idea that he'd almost certainly planned the whole thing before he even got to Britain, and then got married and then had all those children, when he was always intending to, by the looks of it, to go to America. It's difficult to feel positively about somebody doing that, but on the other hand, he's still my great-granddad, so I don't know. Yeah, I think there are some things in my mind I'll need to resolve as I think about it.
A bittersweet end to Jonathan Stern's search for the truth. Next up, we're delving back to life in Britain during World War I. It was an unsettling place for families. As men went off to war, women felt the loneliness and fear of being left behind. It's not surprising then that many wives sought comfort in their husband's absence. Ros Cartledge has heard a family story that connects her ancestor to a visiting Canadian soldier.
The person I'm interested in is my great-granddad. I was told from a young age that my mum's granddad was a Canadian soldier in World War I. My name's Ros. I was born in Lambeth and I've lived in Alberton for most of my life. It was World War I. The Canadian soldiers came over to do the jobs of the men that had gone out to fight the war. My great-grandmother, Bertha, was married to English soldier in World War I, but she had an affair with this Canadian soldier and fell pregnant with my Nan Minnie. When my great-grandmother Bertha's real husband, Joe, came back from World War I, he was happy for her to still be his wife, but he wasn't bringing up another man's child. So Bertha gave my Nan Minnie to her older sister, Mariah. And when my grandmother, Minnie, was 13, she overheard who she thought were her two sisters actually saying that she wasn't their sister. It really upset her. I'm really keen to find out who my great-granddad was. My mum told me that his name was Charlie Weston, and that's when I thought, can I find him?
Ros Cartledge, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I sense there's, even for you, 2 generations removed from your grandmother, Minnie, a bit of pain around this problem.
I was very fond of her, and I felt she went through a lot. She was a very strong, hard woman, but to, realise that who you thought was your mum must have been a terrible shock being a teenager. It did make her go off the rails a bit. So,
did it? She was a wild child?
She was a wild child. She was wild even when she was older. She was a rebel.
So, a fun granny to have.
She was.
Let's have a look at your family tree, if we may. So here you are, Ros, or Rosalind.
Yes.
Going up through your maternal line, Jean Mary Palmer, your grandmother, Minnie Julia Pullen. And, of course, the question is, here we have Bertha, but who was the father of Minnie? Let's now look at Minnie's birth certificate. According to the documents, name and surname of father, John James New.
No, I've never seen that before.
Well, there you are.
That's a shock, because now everyone's kept that a secret. I don't know why. Why would they keep it a secret?
Well, because sometimes things that are written down don't necessarily represent what happened behind closed doors. We know that John New married your great-grandmother in 1910. They had 3 children before the wars, and this is Minnie, a 4th child. He was an electrical engineer, and he joined the RAF and went to war in 1914. The outbreak of the war, he's up and at it. Okay, volunteers. He's still with the military at the end of the war. As far as your family are concerned, Minnie's biological father wasn't the one that's legally down there as her father.
Well, that's what the story was. Yeah.
And that's what your grandmother said, and that's what your mother said?
My grandmother never ever spoke about it. She was old-fashioned, stiff upper lip, don't talk about things.
So let's look and see if there's a possibility the father could be somebody else. You mentioned a Charlie Weston.
Yes.
I think you said there was a rumour that he was Canadian.
Yeah, Canadian soldier.
A Canadian soldier.
And he went back after the war.
Now, the Canadians had a cracking World War I record, depending on your perspective, of course, but they were a very significant military force. They were one of the British Empire's dominions. Because they were under British foreign policy at the time, they had to engage in the war.
Yeah.
And they established the Canadian Expeditionary Force, the CEF. Okay. Now, there are several Charlie Westons of different spellings attached to that force.
Okay.
We have gone through all the possibilities, bearing in mind where Bertha Mann was in London. So we need our Charlie Weston to be with the Canadian Expeditionary Force and to be in Britain. We found one man who we think may fit the bill. Actually born in the UK, but actually enlists not in Canada, but in Seattle in May 1918. So he's in America, but he enlists with the Canadian Expeditionary Force. And we have his next of kin, his mother, placing her in London, less than 2 miles away from where Bertha Mann was.
So that could make sense.
If he's only signed up in May 1918, the likelihood is he isn't going to be sent straight out to the front, and he's in Britain in a holding capacity, in an operation or an administrative capacity. He could have therefore crossed paths with Bertha Mann. They weren't very far away from each other in London.
Makes sense.
And he was also there in the crucial period when conception must have taken place.
Yes.
Because we know the baby was born in August 1919. So I think this may be the Charlie Weston. We cannot say 100% definitively. Let's find out what happens to him. So he's actually discharged for misconduct from the Canadian Expeditionary Force, I'm afraid. And he goes to Canada. Here's the Canadian passenger list going to Halifax, Nova Scotia. So that's him heading out of Britain. So whether or not he knocked up Bertha, we can't prove, but we do know that he was an absent dad if he did.
Yes, definitely.
What are your thoughts towards Bertha as the wife back home to be canoodling with another? That would have brought great disrespect, dishonour, if you like, on Bertha.
That's why perhaps it was she kept it a secret, so My nan was brought up as her sisters till she was a teenager and found out. But I felt sorry for Bertha because she loved much, didn't want to give her up.
This isn't quite the end of Bertha's story.
Okay.
The plot thickens somewhat.
Doesn't surprise me.
Because, in fact, her family didn't only consist of 4 children. I mentioned there were 3 born before the war.
Yeah.
And then there was 1 Minnie born in 1919. In fact, there was a 5th child born in 1916. I'm going to show you the registration of births. Victor Stanley Mann, going on to Bertha's name there, interestingly, but that might be because John New was away on the front line serving. Well, he wasn't there to legally sign the birth certificate.
No, so you couldn't. Yeah.
But looking at his service record and when he had leave and so forth, unless that baby was prematurely born at 27 weeks, and assuming he had a normalish birth and a 9-month incubation, John couldn't have been the father.
Was it the same man? Or?
It couldn't have been Charlie Weston.
OK.
Because we know that he didn't come to England until 1918.
OK, that's it, yeah.
So Bertha was a busy girl.
She was a bit. My nan took after Bertha.
Let's forgive Bertha.
Yeah.
But now let's focus on the little Victor, who did die. 1920, you can see here he is up at the top. This is a register of burials. Victor Stanley New. By now he's got John's surname. Yeah. Bertha probably pulled that one past John, to be honest. She could have fudged when he was born, especially if John was away.
She kept him then.
And he dies aged 3.5.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah.
And she's already grappling with the newborn Minnie when she loses her son, and she's got fallout in her marriage at the same time. So this is a really difficult period for Bertha.
Yeah, he did.
A nightmare.
Yeah,
she did. She had a tough life.
Yeah.
In those days, there was a very strict moral code. And if you did go off track, then you suffered in silence.
Yep.
And that suffering often meant relinquishing a child if you were a woman.
Definitely, to save face, yeah. It's a bit of a surprise, but it makes sense. The pieces are fitting together, so thank you very much. I'm a little bit shocked, surprised, to hear what my great-grandmother Bertha, that she actually had a second affair, which was a total shock to me. And she had a little boy, and he didn't live to 4. That was sad. I've been looking for Charlie for about 4 years now, and this puts my mind at rest now. I know I can stop looking, stop searching, and we can finally put his name on the tree. I'd like to find out more about him as well, so.
Ros came here looking for Charlie Weston, Minnie's real father, but she also leaves with a story of little Victor. Sad tales born out of the war, but a positive conclusion for Ros. Now, when we think of prisoner of war camps, we often think of harsh confinement, inhumane conditions, even oppression. But Anthony Ginman has a story about his ancestor that suggests something radically different.
I'm here today to find out about my great-great-great-grandfather, Francis Goodrum, who fought in the Napoleonic Wars. Francis was captured whilst on a ship that foundered off the French coast, sailing from Dublin to London. He ended up in a prisoner of war camp at Valenciennes in France, and eventually he married a local girl and had 3 children whilst an inmate in the camp. I'm feeling really excited about being here and finding out more about Francis Goodrum and finding out more about his history and where my ancestry comes from.
Hello, Anthony.
Hello.
Really nice to meet you. So first of all, the name of your ancestor was Francis Goodrum.
Francis Goodrum.
Right.
Yes.
And where was he from?
He came from a little place near Diss in Norfolk.
Wonderful. And you think that he played a part in the Napoleonic Wars?
Yes, yes.
Do you know anything about those wars?
Not a huge amount.
Napoleon was at first a revolutionary before he became an emperor. And then he decided that he would master all of Europe.
Right.
Which included Britain and even Russia, and fought a number of conflicts, including in 1805, the Battle of Trafalgar. Regiments from Norfolk, from other places throughout Britain, were fighting continuously from 1805 all the way up to the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. I want you to have a look now at this image on screen.
I can see myself there, yes, and I can see Francis Goodrum there. I was interested in, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Emily there.
I think it's Emile.
My 3 times great-grandmother.
But before that, we want to explore what happened to your ancestor, Francis Goodrum, and what his connection was to those great events, the Napoleonic Wars.
Right.
This is a document written in classical French.
OK.
It talks about how your ancestor was a prisoner of war. He was part of a regiment called the 9th Regiment of Foot.
Right.
This was a Norfolk regiment.
OK, that fits
raised with local Norfolk people. This regiment had been called effectively to fight in the Napoleonic conflict.
Right.
But ran aground, and they ended up in France. And when they were caught, all 262 of them, and put in a prison of war, they would have been together. Now, a British prisoner of war was a very valuable person.
OK.
Because there were over 20,000 Frenchmen who were being held captive in Britain and being ransomed. And the ransom was 3 French soldiers for each British soldier.
Oh, right, so they were quite valuable. Wow, that's incredible.
And this is a very unusual document because it's a dispensation that's been granted in a legal French court that enables Goodrum to marry this French national during a time of war.
Right. So it is very unusual.
It's extremely unusual.
OK.
In this document, Francis had to swear that he would have no contact with Britain.
Oh, right.
So we see that Francis Goodrum was very determined to get married against the odds.
Yes.
At the time when they got married, they already had a child.
Oh, right. So a necessity.
The child had been born on the 19th of May, 1809.
Right, OK.
Before the marriage took place. And he's gone on to have another 2 children whilst he's still a prisoner of war.
So there's a great deal of freedom going on.
A great deal of freedom going on there. So later on, they had another 3 children.
Oh, right, yes.
So those children born 1817, 1821, 1823.
Right, yes.
He managed to get entrance back into Britain after the war.
OK.
He's very careful to come back after 1815. This is what we call a record of death. We don't often get them. Usually it's burial record, but this is actually a record of death.
Francis Goodrum at the Royal Hospital.
And the reason for his death is asthma.
OK. Yeah, not in injury.
Sometimes people in those days would perceive asthma as malingering.
OK.
There wasn't that knowledge to understand what asthma was, which meant that for him, soldiering would have been a very difficult affair.
Right.
The whole of his soldier would have been difficult to do the ordinary work that ordinary soldiers do.
Right.
So he would have laboured. So we could see perhaps a reason why, if he was suffering from asthma throughout his life, why he'd be reluctant to do that soldiering.
OK, yes. Oh, yeah, yes, that's interesting. He would have possibly suffered while he was serving.
Emily lived longer than Francis did.
Right.
And she spent the rest of her life here in England. This is the place in Islington where she died.
Oh, right.
Thomas Charterhouse in Islington. Yeah, so it was a hospital and almshouse for those who were not very wealthy.
Right.
And she died on the 16th of February, 1853. She was 69. And if you note that they've recorded her name as Emily.
Emily.
Because they couldn't pronounce the Amélie.
So they've anglicised
it? Yeah, they've anglicised it, as you yourself did.
Yes.
How does it feel now to see this record as a...
Well, that's amazing. I had no idea that that was the case, and that it's amazing she lived so much longer than Francis did.
So I hope that, in a sense, provides clarity more to your ancestral background.
It certainly throws a lot more light on the whole thing.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much indeed.
That's great.
That's brilliant, thank you.
So, Tony, what did you learn?
Quite a lot. Found out that I've got French ancestry along one line, and goes way back into the mist of time in France.
Did you know you were French?
No.
No idea?
No.
Came from nowhere?
I had an idea there was a bit of French or maybe a bit of Belgium there somewhere, but this is a revelation. And there's been a number of facts and pieces of information which have, been a great surprise to me.
You could make a film out of this, couldn't you?
Yes, there's definitely a sort of, I don't know, a Dr. Zhivago moment there, maybe.
And now you're partly French.
Yes.
Does that change the way you feel about yourself, or what you're going to do next, what you're going to research next, how you think about your family?
I don't know. Yes, I mean, I haven't really thought about it at the moment, but it certainly gives you a different, more international feeling about your ancestry and where you come from.
Yeah, mais oui.
Yeah.
Can you speak French?
No.
Oh, you better start learning.
Better start.
So some French lessons for Tony now that Onyeka has solved the riddle of his ancestor Francis. And of course, even more French names to add to his family tree. Still to come, one man's childhood that left him feeling like an outsider.
There was always something there that wasn't quite right.
The Easter Rising of 1916 was an attempt by Irish nationalist rebels to overthrow the governing rule of the British. It was mainly staged in Dublin, but had ripples throughout the island. Englishman Tony Mercer has heard a family rumour that he's connected to the rebellion. Onyeka Nubia is handling the case.
Hello. How are you? Great to meet you. Good. So you have a question?
I've got an ancestor I don't know much about. My grandfather, Patrick Murphy.
OK.
He's an Irishman born in County Cork in the south of Ireland in the late 1890s.
And what do you think this Patrick Murphy did?
From anecdotal stuff that I've had from various old family members, he was one of about 11 or 12 children. Most of the rest became priests. He joined, apparently, the IRA and was involved in the post office siege in 1916.
Right.
I was then told that he was captured, taken to North Wales, to the Frongoch camp, and later transferred to the British Army because prisoners were allowed to leave the camp if they signed in to the army. That was what I was told. And he joined the tank regiment.
So you believe that your ancestor, Patrick Murphy, was in the IRA and then became a member of the British Army?
Along with many others
many
who were
others.
captured, yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is Patrick, my grandfather, and I found on one of the Irish military sites a photograph of some prisoners at the Frongoch camp in North Wales.
Right.
And looking at them, looking at the date and looking at this picture and the facial features,
yes,
I thought the guy who was the fourth along, the little one in the top row, looked similar to what possibly he would. It's clutching at straws.
We have found 155 different Patrick Murphys in the records, but we don't believe that they're related to the one that you're referring to. In that photograph, it shows a Patrick Murphy with a pin in his lapel. Now, this pin is a silver war badge given to military personnel who had honourably discharged from service, perhaps through injury or illness. This Patrick Murphy enlisted on the 10th of January 1916 and was discharged later that year on the 28th of November 1916, same year. If this man was your ancestor, the suspicion about him participating in the Easter Rising would be incorrect because he just wasn't there at that time.
What a shame. It's the fact, and that's the important thing. At least it nails it.
Yes.
So that's pretty good.
I'm sorry to
thank you for all your work.
So Tony's ancestor, Patrick Murphy, couldn't have played a part in the Easter Rising, as he wasn't even in Ireland at the time. Next up, DNA expert Brad Argent is hoping to bring resolution to a family story that's affected one man throughout his entire life. John Jarrett's parents both played a vital role in keeping food production alive during World War II. He knows that his mother worked as a hop picker in a local farm, but having endured a childhood dogged by whispers and rumours, he's now left with a question mark over whether the man who brought him up is his biological father.
Well, I'm John. I was born in Robertsbridge, which is in Sussex. And I was brought up on a farm.
My name's Nicola, I'm John's daughter, and I come from Hastings.
This is where we used to live. That's going back a long time. That was our bedroom at the top, in the middle there. Myself and my brother used to sleep in there. And as time went on, I moved down to a bedroom downstairs when everybody else moved away. So it was only me left there with my mum and dad, or as I called them, mum and dad. I suppose from an early age, probably from 7 upwards, something wasn't right somewhere in my family. There were 4 of us at home, 2 older sisters and me and an older brother. And I always felt the rejected one. When I got to travelling to the village and going to school, there were stories that I heard that I wasn't a true Englishman and that my mother had misbehaved, but I shut it out. My second sister, she's since passed, and in an argument we were having indoors, she bluntly came out that I wasn't one of the family. A little while after, my sister had poked this in my ear, and I said to my dad, "Is there any truth in this story?" And he thought for a little while, then looked straight at me and said, "What do you think?" Things were left like that. Nobody wanted to answer questions. I've talked to my daughters, and they've done a DNA test, and apparently, according to the DNA test, I am half Italian.
It's been 71 years that this secret's been hidden away. We'd like to know if we have got Italian heritage. There's a few things that have kind of added up through the years. People's ability to tan quite easily, which the rest of the family hasn't got. We even had a joke with my mum that we could all eat a massive bowl of pasta, but she can't.
We're in the process of hoping through this we can find out who my biological parents are, or parent is. Yeah, it could be a big can of worms, so we'll have to use small hooks and see what we can come up with. And I'm looking forward to it.
John, Nicola, welcome. It's a fascinating story.
I hope so. I really do.
How does it make you feel?
A little bit apprehensive. I'm not sure what I'm going to find. I hope it's good news, not bad. Just so I've got something to pass on to my children and the grandchildren.
Did you feel like you belonged in the family?
Not to that extent, no. It felt strange. There was always an atmosphere which is hard to describe. But there was always something there that wasn't quite right. Families argue. You pick up senses from the arguments. So in the end, I switched everything off. I can't remember a great much of my childhood. It's just shut down. I don't want to go back to that. I'm going forward. So now I look forward to see what's going to happen.
I just want to pull up your DNA results. Now, this is what's really interesting about those. And we were talking about your big chunk here.
Yep.
Southern Italy and the Middle East and a little bit from
Scandinavia, yeah.
So you definitely have that map of somebody who's got some English ancestry and something else. The man who raised you might have been Italian and never known. Well, you didn't know until you took a test.
No.
So you might have got your Italian DNA from your dad. He might have been adopted and not known it. He might have had a different biological father and not known it. So the way do we get around that is we test a sibling, right? In this case, we test a sister.
Our sister.
Sister.
Yes.
Doreen.
Oh, interesting.
So, John, these are Doreen's results. And it's pretty obvious just from looking at the ethnicity estimate, half Great Britain. A little bit of Europe South, which is not that surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. See those.
She's quite different.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And when we look closer at the DNA, you and Doreen have a different father. Now, you kind of suspected that.
Yeah, I did, yes, yeah.
But what does it feel like to get the confirmation of that?
She's still my sister.
Nicola, I'm interested in understanding how you reacted to this, because this is your dad's story, sure, but this is part of the puzzle of you. What was that like?
It's got to be nice to just put an end result to it in one way or another, instead of still wondering about bits and pieces. Hearing bits and pieces that he went through when he was little is quite horrendous, really, because of the rumours and things. But yeah, it just kind of confirmed things.
Before we went through this process, you thought, this is Mum and Dad, right? And they're actually quite English, aren't they? But now this result's come back, and there's a question mark, and it's Italian. So we have to start thinking about, OK, how might that situation have come about? You were born, what, 45, February 45? What do you know about that time period?
The war was obviously going on.
Yeah, it was coming towards the end of the war in that period.
They had all this work to do, and all the men at war or working towards the war effort, but they still needed to farm.
Yeah, they still needed the farms done. They were still supplying fruit, veg, food, whichever way you want to put it.
There were two ways they could do that, right? They had this women's land army, right, that, contributed enormously. But then, come 1943, when the Italians surrender, they have all these Italian prisoners of war, about 43,000 men. So now we start to get a sense of, OK, that's how they might be in the area. So this is the Italian prisoners of war and the land girls.
During World War II, Britain's workforce was heavily depleted, with men heading off to serve their country. To keep the home fires burning and the nation fed was crucial. A lot of Britain's food, which had been imported before the war, was now growing scarce. Two distinctly different new armies would plug the gap: foreign prisoners of war and the Women's Land Army. During and after the Second World War, 400,000 German and 154,000 Italian prisoners of war were held here in Britain.
The crew of one of the Duce's submarines landed at a Scottish port on their way to an internment camp. Mussolini had told them that they were winning the war, hence their confident, happy smiles.
Britain viewed the Italian prisoners as less of a threat than the Germans and let them leave the camps during the day to earn a wage working the land. And work, of course, alongside the land girls. The Women's Land Army was reinstated in 1939, having been disbanded at the end of World War I. 80,000 women who'd previously stayed at home or worked in offices answered the call and took to the outdoors. Many who did found themselves working with men from far afield. Friendships and more were grown in the fields and farms of Britain. Many married, many had babies, and of course, many had babies but never married.
Kind of puts it into context, doesn't it?
It's there, isn't it? Can't argue with that.
What you see happening is you do see, women having relationships with these prisoners of war. What we think is the most likely outcome, half of who you are, is that it's an Italian prisoner of war, most likely from the southern parts of Italy.
Yeah.
Now, you've taken the DNA sample.
I have, yeah.
And it's in the DNA network.
Yeah.
At some point, you'll get a match with someone, and it'll be a close match. And they'll have a lot of Italian ethnicity.
Yeah.
And that match will lead you to your biological father and the other half of the puzzle.
Yeah.
That is John.
This would be nice. So we wait and see. You shook the bag.
Well, look, thank you both. And like all journeys down genealogy...
Yeah, they're all stepping stones.
Yeah. There isn't a destination, all right? There's just a waypoint on a journey to somewhere else. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for all you've done. we're getting closer to what we were trying to find out. So hopefully somebody will come through with DNA and it'll match it and we will know.
No, it's just nice to know that what you thought was true is true.
Yeah.
So it puts your mind to rest a little bit so you're not still wondering.
Someone will probably come through with DNA that will match with mine, albeit male, female, whichever. Perhaps we can follow the story through from then.
It's been a long journey.
Yes, it has, yeah.
It's been quite interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's brought us all closer together as a little family unit.
Just little answers coming through
Yeah.
that are coming up positive. We wait for the big one.
Might see.
So we've helped John by confirming that his biological father wasn't the man who brought him up. Now he's hoping it won't be long before he gets a DNA match from Italy that'll finally identify his real father. It's been an exciting day in Somerset, solving mysteries and discovering lost family. But it's goodbye for now. Join us again soon when we'll be helping more people discover their place in history.